Hello, health seekers, and those of you seeking good health through non-conventional methods. Today I'm going to be talking about personality types and the bearing that these can have on our state of health. If we think of the mind and the body being inextricably linked, then of course it would have an impact on our health and awareness of what personality type we are, what we like, what we don't like, what's good for us, etc. So when I first was made aware of personality types, I freaked out a little bit and I was like, you can't put me in a box, I will not be pigeonholed. Quite funny really, because then when I went on to do a couple of them, there's a reason why I said that. That's part of my personality type. That's just something that I would actually say as a reaction to being labelled, as it were. But it's not really about labels, it's about learning about yourself. So I learned so much about myself when I read the results of the first test that I did, which was a series of questions that you answer as honestly as possible without overthinking it. I became absolutely fascinated because it was like reading about myself in a book. And yeah, it was just mind-opening. It really helped me to understand why I do the things that I do, why I like the things that I like, why I prefer some things over others, what are my weaknesses, what are my strengths. So this is great for self-development and also emotional growth and self-awareness. So I dare you, take the tests. You may just be as fascinated as I was and still am, which is why I'm doing this video about it. So I'm going to talk about two different types of personality tests that I would recommend to do. The first one is one called MBTI. It's based on the Myers-Briggs philosophy. This started, well, basically I'm going to give an overview of what they are, the background of each type, and how they can relate to our health. So I'll give some examples about how these principles can affect our health and wellness. So yeah, back to the first one. If you're interested in psychology, like me, then you might be interested to know that MBTI originally came from the renowned Swiss psychologist who was called Carl Gustav Jung. Carl Jung to most people. He was a disciple of Sigmund Freud, but he distanced himself from Freud when he basically disagreed with his take on sexuality. Freud's very debatable approach when it comes to sexuality. So he's the originator of this MBTI personality typing, and he found that there were 4 basic psychological functions, which are to think, to feel, to sense, and perceive. So he also proposed that there were 2 main character types, being introverted and extroverted. So we all possess all of these functions, to think, to feel, to perceive, etc. And we also all have a introverted and extroverted side to our personality, but one is predominant. And basically, for example, we're either predominantly thinking, as in terms of rationality and thinking things through, or feeling. So you'll get people that are more feeling than thinking, and vice versa. So we have all of the functions, but just some are tipped in the balance. So yeah, Myers-Briggs. The name Myers-Briggs comes from a woman called Isabel Briggs Myers and her mother, Catherine Briggs, and they wanted to take this theory of Carl Jung more into practice out of theory, to make it more accessible to individuals to gain from this knowledge, and also in groups, like in group therapy and things like that. So they wrote a book called Please Understand Me. It's actually, I don't have it here, I meant to have it here, never mind. Yeah, this book called Please Understand Me was written by them, and this is the book that I actually read and did the written personality test in a tick box kind of questionnaire. And you can do it all online now, and the test that I recommend will be in the description below in this video. So it's a free personality test that you can do, you don't have to pay for it. There are paid versions, but there's a lot of stuff for free online now, so I'd recommend them to get you started. In this MBTI became very famous for employers because employers want to know basically what personality type you are before they'll hire you in lots of places, especially America. It's becoming more common in Europe as well now. They'll want to know what your type is because they know that each type, there are about 16 different types, like subgroups. Each type has its own set of special skills. So it explains why some people are good in one job and not another. Basically, you're in the wrong job. You're not in the one that's suited to you, as in your personality. So employers know this, and they know because they want to know because they get the most out of each employee if they hire the right person for the job. So it kind of makes sense. So yeah, they're very accurate, these tests. More importantly, they benefit us as people because it's about us, it's about our life, right? So why is it important and how is it going to impact on my health, on our health? Okay, so the personality typing one, let's look at introvert versus extrovert, for example. So when I found out that I'm predominantly introverted, it helped me beyond measure to be able to accept myself as normal for me. It gave me a license to be myself. There's freedom in it. Basically, there's no right and wrong. Extroverts are great. Introverts are also great. But it's about understanding the difference, which is why that book is called Please Understand Me, because when we have an insight into it, we can understand to and relate to people's difference. Otherwise, we only tend to see the world from our perspective. Being extroverted or introverted are always the best, we're looking at them and thinking, oh, they're weird. But they're not really, they're just different. So let's understand each other. Please understand me and you. So yeah, learning that about myself, it gave me license to be able to be my introverted self without feeling bad or comparing myself to others, thinking, oh, pushing myself to try and be an extrovert when I'm just not. So it's like, I can breathe, I can be me. It's okay, it's normal for me. So, and also not to force myself to try and be an extrovert because that's exhausting for an introvert. So, yeah, it's about basically acknowledging our natural state and, yeah, giving ourselves license to be ourselves. But with this also comes a set of challenges because we all have weaknesses. Introverts have weaknesses that can lead them down a certain path if they don't challenge themselves. And the same for extroverts. For example, it's not healthy for me to get totally lost in introversion because I've just become like a recluse or a hermit, and never go out and never go to parties or never do anything interesting. Well, not necessarily not interesting, but extroverted. So sometimes I do need to push myself to go outside of my comfort zone, but then balancing that by not doing too much because then I can get burnt out easily and get exhausted and stressed and depressed. And same for extroverts. They also need to learn how to not burn the candle at both ends, exhaust themselves because they also will end up mentally exhausted and physically exhausted, and they need to learn how to be alone. Whereas it's not a problem for introverts to be alone. We love it. So there's a link in my description below by a doctor called Dr. Ramani, and she's great. I think she's a psychologist. Maybe she's a psychiatrist, I need to check. But she talks about how introverted people are often confused with situations or states such as anxiety, depression, social anxiety. Yeah, so basically she highlights the differences between introversion and those commonly known kind of mental health disorders, really. Well, depression, definitely. But yeah, social anxiety is something that I thought I had for a long time because it does induce this anxious kind of state. But it's not social anxiety per se, it's because I'm an introvert. So watch that video if you're an introvert. It's really interesting. There's a few other links there as well that I've put in the description. So that's MBTI. I would highly recommend doing the test. As I said, there are 16 personalities in general. Doesn't mean everyone within those 16 different groups are identical, because we're not. We have to take into account our culture, our background, our upbringing, social standing. So many different things come into play. So the second test that I want to talk about is called the Enneagram. And this is also a method of typing people's personalities, and it was originally devised by a man called Oscar Ichazo. He was born in Bolivia, and he journeyed to the east, to Asia, and he gathered lots of knowledge before he returned to South America to put together this approach. So, basically in this approach there are 9 different personality types, and we can all identify with all of the different types, all 9 types, but one of them will be prominent in us. Same as with the MBTI, we have all of the facets, but one will be dominant. And then you also have a side number. I have my little diagram here that I made earlier. I know, I'm sorry it's reversed, but this is just an idea. You'll go online and you can see the map and you can do some research on it. There's some links in the description again. But to explain, so you have all the different types numbered from 1 to 9. And then you have, say for example, you're predominantly a 1. So you will be predominantly the type 1 with a wing, number 2, or 9. So you're a 1 wing 9 or 1 wing 2. If you're a 2, predominantly you will have a wing of 1 or a wing of 3. And it goes like that round. So your wing number is one of your sidekicks, as it were. So that's how that works. But yeah, so the different names for the different types are: 1 is the reformer, the 2 is the helper, the achiever, the individualist, the investigator, the enthusiast, the challenger, and peacemaker. I think I missed one out there. Yeah, but you can look it up yourselves. So yeah, that's just a basic diagram of the different types. Really interesting because the top 3 types here are the intuitive types, and they are dominated by power and control. So the power and control are very important to 8, 9 and 1. And then you have 2, 3 and 4, which are the affirmation and the esteem group. So affirmation and esteem is very important to this group. And then you have 5, 6 and 7, which are concerned primarily about safety and security. So being safe and being secure is very important to those types. But yeah, I'll come back to that a little bit more later. So again, you can do an online test to find out which one is your dominant group for the Enneagram. Genes, our genetics, have a huge part to play in which type we are, but again, not everything is fully known about how we end up in the type that we are. Obviously genetics, but also possibly early life, children, you know, when you're growing up, you know, your life can affect you, which may lead you into more one type than the other. But what's great about this type is that there is a clear way to find out which level of functioning you're at. Now this is really interesting because you're either healthy, average, or unhealthy in your level of functioning. And there's a few in between areas as well. But how do we know whether we're healthy or not? It's really interesting. I'll put a link again in the description to a website where you can learn a lot more about the Enneagram and the different types. But the best way to describe whether we are healthy or not is our capacity to be present in the moment. So maybe you'll notice that people have different levels of awareness, or being able to be present in the moment is very important for identifying which level of health you're at in this personality group. So the more we move down the levels of awareness or ability to be present, then we're more identified with our ego, and we become increasingly negative and restrictive in our patterns of behaviour. So that would lead basically our personality to become more defensive, reactive to situations, and automatic, like kind of being on autopilot. So as a result, we have less and less real freedom and less real consciousness. So a lot of it's to do with those aspects. So yeah, that's moving down the levels. We also become more compulsive and destructive in our behaviours and ultimately self-defeating. So yeah, that's the decline in the levels. And each number, when you go and have a look at that website, you can read about each type and healthy levels, unhealthy levels, and average levels. You can read all about it, so you can actually identify where you are in a healthy level of functioning. So in contrast to that, moving towards health or up the levels, it's linked to being more present and awake in our minds, in our hearts, and in our bodies. So yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory really. So let's take an example. Let's look at type, just take one. I just said, oh, let's just pick one today because we can't discuss all the types, it'll take too long. So examples of type 1s in human beings that you will probably know are Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Margaret Thatcher, Prince Charles, Confucius and Plato. Were all ones. And this type is known as the reformer, and they are called this because they have a sense of mission, a sense of purpose or a mission that they're on, which leads them to want to improve the world in various ways, using whatever degree of influence that they have. So this type, they're very principled, they are purposeful, they are self-controlled, and they are perfectionistic. And they're also instinctive, very instinctive, and their dominant emotion is anger, like I wrote here, the reds. Their dominant emotion is anger. So they will try their best to, well, the ones would try their best to suppress their anger or control it, and also their instinctual energy. Their feeling is that they have to stay in control of themselves, especially of their impulses and their angry feelings, and this is at all times. So they're very controlling of themselves. Type 1s, I've done the arrows here, so when they're in growth, they move towards 7. So 7 is growth, and when they are stressed, they move to a state of the 4. So they become more like the 4 type. So it's really easy to identify, because then you can go away and read about type 4 and type 7. Oh, how are they? And then you know whether you're growing or whether you're descaling. So it helps us to understand why, when you read all the types, it's really interesting why people react differently to stress, because they go to a different number, they go to a different type, different personality type, a different aspect of themselves, really. So level 1s at their best, so a level 1 at absolute best level of functioning, they are extraordinarily wise, they are discerning, they accept what is, so they're in the moment, they're present. They become transcendently realistic. That's really beautiful, isn't it? They become very all-knowing of the best action to take in every moment. They are humane, inspiring and hopeful, and they possess the mindset which is the truth will be heard. So they're like truth seekers and mission people. That's level 1 at their best. So if they go to the worst level, at level 9, so there's levels 1 to 9 that you can place yourself in, they become condemnatory towards other people. They become punitive and cruel, and they rid themselves of wrongdoers. Also susceptible to severe depression and nervous breakdown. Suicide attempts as well can be likely for them. So yeah, quite serious really. And in general, they would be linked to the obsessive compulsive disorders and depressive personality types. So it's really interesting to see how analysing our personality type, it really gives us an insight into our state of mental health, and it thereby gives us the tool of how to improve it, or at least what we should be aiming for. So I would really encourage you to do your personality types if you want to increase your mental health and your state of awareness of which level you're in, and just general knowledge of yourself. To help us to accept who we are and work within those parameters to become the best version of ourselves that we can. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed that video, and next time I hope to do a video on talking a bit more about personality types, but highly sensitive people and also empathic people. So how to know whether you fit into those categories or not, and also how that impacts on our health. So that's what I'll do next. But I hope you have a lovely day or evening, or wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and take care, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Bye.